Welcome to the Holy Post. We have a pope, and he's American. Cardinal Robert Prevost from Chicago is now Pope Leo XIV, and his connection to the Holy Post is closer than you might think. Today we discuss reactions to the new pope and the significance of his name. Then Katelyn Beaty is back to talk about the evolution of the Q conference led by Gabe and Rebekah Lyons. Why did an event that started with a positive vision of Christian cultural engagement for the common good shift to embrace the culture war? And what does it reveal about the larger changes within evangelicalism? Also this week, the Trump administration is accepting refugees into the US again, as long as they're white. The Quakers are on the move, Caterpillar Flair, and baby girl Bible names. Hey, for those of you who are in Northern Virginia or the DC area, don't forget that Kaitlyn is coming to town this Friday, May 16th for a Holy Post event with Duke Kwan. Tickets might still be available if you go to our website and check them out at holypost.com/events. You can go there and reserve your seats today. And while you're there, check out the new website and merch store. And of course, all the incredible content that we're releasing every day exclusively for Holy Post Plus subscribers. All right, here is episode 669.
Hey there, welcome to the Holy Post Podcast. This is Phil Vischer. I'm here with, all the way from Duke University, Kaitlyn Chess. Hi, Kaitlyn.
Hi, Phil.
And all the way from right next to me, Skye Jitani.
Hi.
Hi, Skye. How's it going?
I'm doing great.
Oh, man.
Oh.
That's fantastic. We learned something amazing today. Was it today we learned this, or was it yesterday that we learned this?
I don't know what you're going to say.
I learned it yesterday.
You learned it yesterday? Well, we have a new pope, and we're going to talk about that later. But we learned yesterday that our new pope had...
Our?
The world's.
Okay.
The world's new pope. I'm not Catholic, but I play one on TV. The world's new pope had lunch about 20 feet from where we're sitting right now.
Yes, in August.
Last August.
Yes.
He wasn't pope yet. He was in his pre-pope phase. His pope in training.
Pre-papal.
Yeah, he hadn't
Pre-papal.
He hadn't yet come out from his cocoon. Isn't that what that's called?
Yeah. It's in the papal stage.
Right.
The pre-papal stage. Anyway, he was in downtown Wheaton last August, and he had lunch at Ivy, the restaurant, which is in the same building that we're in. He was actually in the building we're in. And the Pope.
Our office has a secret door into the restaurant.
Yes, we could have snuck in.
Yes.
And we could have...
If only you had known.
We could have dressed as waiters. You know, how they do that sometimes.
They just have a black shirt.
Yeah,
usually.
in spy shows, you know, they're like, oh, I'm going to dress as a caterer, and then I can infiltrate and get to the very important person with my very important message. What message would you have given the future pope had you been able to sneak in as waitstaff last August?
I probably would have told him the Daily Special. I mean, nobody knew he was going to be the pope. He was Cardinal Bob.
But if you had known...
I would say come back next year after the conclave and do an interview.
Next year when you're important. Okay, it's time for the theme song.
What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Skye and Phil and the Holy Post. Skye and Phil and the Holy Post.
And sometimes Kaitlyn.
Today's episode is sponsored by Sunday's Food for Dogs. We love our dog. Her name is Keena. We love to give her belly rubs. And she loves to patrol our backyard to make sure no squirrels break into our house to steal our valuables. We also love to give her Sunday's Food for Dogs. It's fresh, healthy dog food that's easy to store and serve. Most dog food is one or the other, either fresh and healthy or easy to store and serve. Because Sunday's is air dried, it doesn't require refrigeration or prep. It comes right to our door so we never run out. And it's healthy food. Human grade ingredients, 90% meat, 10% superfoods, 0% anything else. Folks who've switched their dogs to Sunday's notice health improvements like softer fur, fresher breath, and more energy. Keena loves Sunday's Food for Dogs, and we love that it keeps her healthy and strong so she can keep the squirrels from taking our stuff. Give it a try. Right now you can get 40% off your first order of Sundays. Go to sundaysfordogs.com/holypost or use code HOLYPOST at checkout for 40% off your first order. This episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. Hey, if you're like me, you want to use your money to do good in the world, to support causes you really believe in. But by the end of the month, your money's all gone. Maybe it's because, like me, you've got like 50 subscriptions, half of which you don't even remember signing up for. That app for your kids that they used like once, that delivery service, the fitness plan that didn't work out so well. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills and free up money for the things you really care about. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has helped save its members an average of $740 a year with over $500 million in canceled subscriptions. I can see all my subscriptions in one place, and Rocket Money will help me cancel the ones I'm not using with just a few taps. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/holypost. That's rocketmoney.com/holypost. rocketmoney.com/holypost. And thanks to Rocket Money for sponsoring this episode. Anyway, I thought that was...
It's pretty amazing.
That's pretty amazing.
It is.
We were this close.
Mm-hmm.
We were this close to the Pope.
They should put
pre-Pope.
like garland or something on the chair he sat in. And
Merit garland.
They could make some money.
Make it into a shrine and a pilgrimage site.
Yeah.
For all the Catholics in Wheaton.
Hey, there's a big Catholic church.
I was going to say,
I know.
there's a big Catholic store.
And there's a huge Catholic church right next door in Glen Ellen.
I'm just saying it's not the reputation of
No,
Wheaton.
it is not. It is not.
Yes.
We have a somewhat waspish.
Although I live in
reputation.
the side of town, which has a lot of Catholic families.
Right. Okay. I got animal news. We're going to start with some animal news just to keep it light. But it's a little bit macabre, I'm afraid.
Oh, whoa.
Just a little macabre. A newly described species from Hawaii. It is a caterpillar.
We were talking about caterpillars just a minute ago.
A new caterpillar. We were?
When they pop out of their cocoon.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And with their little mitre hats and
And you
robes.
become the Pope.
Yeah.
It's called the bone collector caterpillar.
This sounds like a comic character.
Whoa, yeah.
It's a pill-sized caterpillar, so a little guy, and it's from a genus of caterpillars where they weave little silk coverings that they carry around with them that they can kind of hide inside. Little, but they're kind of on their back.
Like a shell.
Kind of, yes, but it's silk, so not hard. Silk, a silk shell, like a robe, like a kimono. Little caterpillar in his or her kimonos. Are caterpillars both genders? Are caterpillars genders? Do butterflies have genders? I am so confused, but that's not the story. Let me get back to the bone collector
I'm
moth.
curious, though.
This genus of caterpillar will sometimes pick up objects and attach it to their silk coverings, like
Ew.
pebbles.
Like decoration.
Yeah, they'll decorate
Like
their own coverings.
Bones?
These pill-sized caterpillars look like piles of parts because they decorate their drag-along dwellings with scavenged body parts from dead insects.
Absolutely not.
Why?
It's gross on
No.
one level, but it's also
No,
kind
it's
of
gross on all
it's also
levels.
kind of adorable. They're cruising around like, "Oh, this looks delicious. I'll eat some of this and then put the rest on my back."
No.
These moths belong to a genus called Hyposmocoma. Hyposmocoma.
Mm-mm.
Hyposmocoma, found in Hawaii, known for spinning portable silk cases in which they hide. Some decorate their cases with pebbles, or I always forget, is it lichen or lichen? Or
Lichen.
lichen, but no other known Hyposmocoma uses insect remains. And that is fascinating.
Mm-mm.
Oh, it's great. And they found them with like ant heads stuck to them.
I'm
They'll-
looking at pictures.
Ah, no.
yeah, they'll pull a head so they can be covered. They found one that was entirely covered with segments of spider legs. Just like it just so it looks like they think they're doing it partly because they may live near spiders and they want to disguise themselves so they look just like a pile of parts that has already been eaten.
So, but these eventually become butterflies too?
They become moths. They become a
moths.
particular
So
kind
they
of...
do have genders, I learned. Butterflies and moths.
Oh, okay. That's good. And how do you tell the boys from the girls?
I don't know.
Which-
By the kinds of things they choose to put on
Accessorize.
their exoskeleton.
Which sports
yeah.
team
Their
they-
accessory choices.
Why, this one is bedazzled. And this one looks like a monster truck.
That is this is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Very weird.
And
I don't like that at all.
but it's not news of the butt. Katelyn?
I do like that, but this is.
It
this
reminds
is
me of people
gross.
who go over the top with like bumper stickers.
Yeah, just stop.
Yeah.
Just pick one.
Or stickers on their MacBooks. You know, when
That's
they're
another
just like
example. Or
completely
Oh.
covered.
These caterpillars are like the equivalent of a server at TGI Fridays.
Yes.
What?
Or was Bennigan's? Which ones would have more?
All the
Pins.
the flair. Is
Yes.
that what they called it?
Yeah, they would bedazzle their own
Mm-hmm.
uniforms.
This is insect flair.
An ant head here, fly legs and wings there, a stuck-on weevil head, and spider legs jutting out all over.
No.
Look at these pictures.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
But some of them they'll pick up twigs or rocks or pebbles, you said, but mostly it's other insect parts.
No, this species exclusively insect parts.
Oh, they've specialized.
Other species, pebbles or lichen. This species, the bone collector moth caterpillar, only parts of dead insects that it may or may not have eaten.
They're like the Jawas of the insect kingdom.
Yeah. Are they?
Yeah. Caitlin doesn't get that reference.
I don't know.
You
what
know,
that
they're
means.
scavengers. They just collect.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah. I first thought of Jabba the Hutt.
No, Jawa.
And it was like, what was he covered
J-A-W-A.
with? He didn't cover himself with anything.
No.
Jawas don't cover themselves with anything either.
But they collect. They go
Yeah.
around and they collect
Yeah,
stuff.
and they
these
put
guys-
it in their what's that thing called?
Sandcrawler.
Sandcrawler.
Yeah.
I was thinking Land Rover.
That's the British.
Yeah. Okay. This has been animal news.
No.
Caitlin is very much done.
I'm done. Mhm.
Kaitlyn done. So what's going on in the world? Well, I'll tell you what's going on in the world. As of like 12 hours ago, we no longer have a huge trade war with China. Did you hear about that?
I heard it's been on pause.
Yeah, it's paused. It's
Yeah.
paused for 90 days. Why? What did they give us to make us pause? Nothing. They said they were willing to continue talking. And so we said, oh, it's just what we wanted. You're not tariffed at 145% anymore.
Is it, 30 now?
Yeah, it's down to 30. It's just, none of it makes sense.
No.
None of it makes sense because you're not going to, if the point was so that people would build big factories and invest billions of dollars in the US to get around the tariffs, well, they're not going to do that because they're turning them on and off like the light switch. Like, maybe this, maybe, actually it's a dimmer switch because they're all over the place. Woohoo!
I feel like the president is like a 3-year-old who keeps banging his spoon on the table. And at some point, the parent just needs to come and take the spoon away
Yeah.
because he's so erratic with his policy on
Yeah.
tariffs and he shouldn't have this anyway.
And I know who the parent is.
Well, it's supposed to be Congress.
Yes, Congress.
Congress is the one who
Congress.
has the right to levy tariffs.
Yeah.
And he's-
Congress is the holder of spoons.
Yes. So they just need to go, look,
Yeah.
enough, Donald.
Yeah. Because the whole world,
You're annoying the whole restaurant.
the whole world is covered in Cheerios
Yeah.
at this point.
Just we'll take the spoon back now.
Yeah.
And
Take
we'll-
the spoon.
Yeah.
Take the spoon. Okay. We got tariffs. Yes. Tariffs. No. What tariffs? Did I say I was going to tariff? Ha ha. What I meant was, let's suspend habeas corpus. Stephen Miller, sidekick of Donald Trump,
Isn't that what the caterpillar puts on him?
is looking into it. He's looking into whether they can suspend habeas corpus to go, which, so you know, is the concept that says you cannot be held in prison without any recourse or due process. And this does happen sometimes. It mostly happens in wartime or extreme emergency situations where you realize, we got to get those people under wraps right now because clear and present danger. But we want to use it now to just grab immigrants and put them away.
But let's back up a second.
Yeah.
The justification for suspending or looking into suspending habeas corpus.
Because it's an emergency.
Because they're claiming we're in an emergency because we're being invaded.
It's an alien invasion.
Similarly, all this tariff nonsense that's been going on for the last...
It's an emergency.
Is because it's an emergency, so-called emergency. And under emergency action, the president can levy
do whatever he
tariffs.
wants.
And this is the excuse for all the nonsense happening in this administration is everything's an emergency. Therefore, we can bypass Congress. We can bypass the courts. We can bypass due process. Because emergency. And Like, somebody has to be the grown-up here and be like, this is
None of
not
these
an
are emergencies.
emergency.
None of these are emergencies.
Don't you fall into the trap of the boy who cried wolf? So that when there is
No.
an emergency, suddenly people are like, no, we're not.
Not if the boy is also the king. The king can keep crying wolf as long as he wants because there's no authority to say, no, I'm not coming this time.
This is exactly how Emperor Palpatine took over the Galactic
I know.
Republic.
I've brought that up. And it was Jar Jar Binks' fault.
Yes, it was.
Jar Jar Binks gave the final vote to give Emperor Palpatine emergency powers. And I knew he annoyed me right from the very beginning because he would be the undoing of democracy in the galaxy. What world was it? Was it just, it was like the...
It was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Oh, okay, so it wasn't like a name. Was there a name for that world?
The galaxy.
The galaxy.
Yeah.
Okay. That's how the galaxy... Kaitlyn, you're too young to remember this because it was a long time ago in a galaxy
I stopped
far,
paying attention like 2 minutes ago.
Are you like just Googling other stuff? Are you working?
Well, I just could tell you were talking about Star Wars.
Are
and
you
I don't know what
grading
you're talking
papers?
about, so
What are you doing over there?
I have lots of books.
I'm very offended. All right. But this is Emperor Palpatine all over. We didn't learn anything from Star Wars or the Roman Empire. We didn't learn anything
I didn't.
from any of that. But the good news is we are now open to accepting refugees again. If they come from South Africa and they're white. Then the plaque on the Statue of Liberty rings true again. If you are white from South Africa and maybe you're feeling a little uncomfortable because of some recent laws that have been passed that could allow for the taking some property potentially and redistributing it to balance out the fact that the very small white minority owns almost all farmland in South Africa and the very large black majority owns almost no farmland in South Africa. They haven't actually seized any land, but there is a law where there could be some redistribution of land if it's deemed necessary. And the Trump administration, which has a number of high-profile people with connections to South Africa, Elon Musk being only one of them, are suddenly very, very concerned about the racial discrimination being practiced in South Africa against whitey. So we got to get him out of there.
Okay, you got to put this all in context.
What?
Of the fact that this is the same administration that's basically shut down all refugee resettlement in this country.
Yeah, right. Right. That's why I said we're open to accepting refugees again. We stopped it. We don't want any Somalian refugees that are fleeing the crisis in Somalia or Palestinian refugees fleeing who are dying or even Ukrainian refugees. We're ready to send them back because for some reason we decided that maybe Russia was.
Or how about this?
The ones
How about
we
the
like.
Afghan refugees
Oh, yeah.
who helped U.S. military personnel who got abandoned by us when we left that country so quickly and have been trying to make their way to the United States because they're under threat of persecution and death in Afghanistan, and we won't accept them. But we not only are we welcoming white quote unquote refugees from South Africa, most of whom are very wealthy landowners, we have paid for charter flights to bring them to the United States. And when they land in Dulles, which is supposed to happen today at Washington, D.C.'s airport, they're going to be greeted by U.S. dignitaries. This is not just being open to refugees.
What is this?
This is rolling out the red carpet
for white people in Africa that might be experiencing some racial discrimination.
Yeah. The one thing I appreciate about this entire story and this administration is it's no longer a dog whistle. It's a bullhorn.
Yeah.
Right?
It's gotten weird.
Remember what Trump said in his first administration? He got upset and said, why are we accepting so many immigrants from blankety blank countries? And why can't we get more people from like Norway?
From Norway.
Which is his way of saying, I want white people, not brown people. And now they're accepting
white people,
wealthy white people
from the brownest continent on earth,
calling them refugees when there are people of color who are legitimate refugees seeking asylum from real persecution, and we're not chartering planes for them. And we're rolling out the red carpet.
And 80% of the people that seek asylum at the southern border are Christians.
Yes,
that are seeking asylum because they feel their lives are in danger. But we have a group that's trying to root out anti-Christian bias, but not if it happens in another country and results in someone wanting our help.
Who's brown?
Who's brown. Okay, Kaitlyn, what should a Christian think about this, Kaitlyn? You're a Christian.
I mean, it seems both patently racist and also like it just kind of panders to certain people who see this as like a signal for the Trump administration's larger kind of social political interests.
Yeah.
Like this is affecting a very small number of people. So that's significant. It's a form of hypocrisy that is like blatantly racially discriminatory, but it also doesn't seem to like actually be a policy that's intended to like do very much for a large group of people. It seems like a policy that's intended to signal to certain people in the US in a pretty explicit way, to Skye's point, the priorities of this administration, which goes back to, I think with the first Trump administration, we were dealing a lot with, okay, it seems like the underlying motivation, or it seems like the eventual effect, or it seems like if you read between the lines, we know what he's doing. It's almost harder in some ways to know how to respond to things that are so blatant and so, I mean, you get to a point, and this is where I think we have to really work in our communities to have good conversations about these kinds of things. It's hard when it's something like this that you're like, you want to scream, this is just obviously wrong and bad. Like even trying to explain to another person why this is wrong and bad feels almost wrong and bad to have to explain it. We've got to both find ways to like actually unpack the both political and then like the biblical reasons for how we're thinking about how we would make judgments about these things, but find ways to communicate well with people who are going to come in with different presuppositions and different biases that will inform how they view these things. Because the part about this that I feel like is going to be really difficult is this is going to be an example where if you're talking with a family member or someone at church about this, it's going to seem to many of us listening like this is just so obviously bad. I don't even know how to talk to someone about why it's bad, and finding ways to be able to do that, I think is a real challenge, but a really important challenge right now.
Do you think he's doing this, or the administration's doing this, essentially to troll their political opponents? Like this will really get them angry.
A lot of things are
like trolling. Yeah.
The South African government responded. Did you see this in the article?
Yeah.
This is my favorite part. They they responded to the Trump administration and called out their hypocrisy. This is the quote. It is ironic that the executive order by Donald Trump makes provision for refugee status in the U.S. for a group of South Africa that remains amongst the most economically privileged, while vulnerable people in the U.S. from other parts of the world are being deported and denied asylum despite real hardship. Even the South African government gets how ridiculous this is.
Yeah. Well, it's because they're woke. So, you know, what are you going to do? But the good news is, Kaitlyn, the good news is in all of this, the Quakers are on the move.
The Quakers are on the move.
The Quakers are on the move. And I don't mean the oatmeal guy. I mean,
it's like Aslan is on the move.
Yes. A group of Quakers are marching more than 300 miles from New York City to Washington, D.C. to demonstrate against the Trump administration's crackdown on immigrants. The Quakers have been huge social activists like forever.
Forever.
When they weren't quaking, they were marching. That was their old slogan. When we're not quaking, we're marching.
Oh.
That's
how about when we march, the world.
They might want to be let know
that. They were so adamantly abolitionist during the slavery era in the U.S. that Harriet Tubman was once quoted saying, "A Quaker is almost as good as a black in terms of helping. If you find a Quaker, it's almost like finding a black person." That's how helpful they were on the Underground Railroad. So Trump has activated the Quakers.
Now you're in trouble.
Stuff's going to happen.
Yeah.
Stuff is going to happen.
How big are the Quakers now?
Some of them are over 6 feet.
I don't bump.
There's not a ton of Quakers, I don't think.
Yeah, no.
Because they were like not Philadelphia, but Pennsylvania was their turf.
Yeah.
Right?
Quaker oil. Quaker State.
Quaker State?
That's the Quaker State.
That's right.
Quaker State oil.
And William Penn.
Yeah.
Was a Quaker.
Quaker. Quaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Pennsylvania is on the march. Pennsylvania is marching. Would you think Pennsylvania is still like 90% Quaker? Would you estimate?
I don't know.
That's where most of the Quakers.
No.
This is what Google's for.
No.
How many Quakers are there?
Absolutely not.
You should know when I'm joking.
Here we go. Ready?
Just joking.
There's an estimated 75,000 Quakers in the United States. That's not a lot.
Oh dear.
Wow.
That's well, if they all march. Think we can get them all to march? Or
Here's
do
what's
we have
crazy.
to pitch in?
In 1700, there were about 250,000. Oh, never mind.
Oh.
There were 250,000 Europeans in North America. About 55,000 of them were Quakers.
Okay.
But still,
So we've
percentage-wise,
we've given them like 250 years, and they've gone from 55,000 to 75,000.
yeah, but
Quakers, procreate. Come on.
yeah, but think about it. Back then, that they were 1/5 of the population of North America.
Right. They didn't keep up.
Yeah.
They got left behind.
It's kind of hard to turn this kind of activism into like a good PR pitch to people.
Fair enough. But it does show small group can make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It's time to talk about the elephant that was in the room right next to us. It's time to talk about last week. We knew. Did we know there was a pope last week? When was the pope?
Was it Friday?
No, we didn't know.
Yeah, we talked about the conclave.
We knew there would be.
We knew that we were headed for conclavity. We didn't know what would come out of the conclaving.
Oh.
And now we know.
It's conclaving.
It didn't
Hey.
take very long.
Hey, don't mess with me. No, it was fast and most exciting of all. And the whole world is excited about this. The Pope is from Chicago.
The Pope.
Da Pope. There's
There's so many great
there's
memes.
so many memes. So many
So I saw
Chicago Pope memes.
I saw one that showed the Blues Brothers,
Yeah.
and it said that the Pope missed an opportunity when he came out on the balcony to have the best opening line ever for a Pope. And he could have said, "We're on a mission from God."
Yeah.
I mean, that would have just destroyed. That would have.
And he put on his shades.
To all the
And
Italians
then he gets
waiting
into an
below.
old cop car, takes off. Oh man, that would have been great. Why didn't he do it? Missed opportunity. Maybe we can rewind and he can do it again. Many interesting opinions. I think everyone is happy about this Pope except MAGA. MAGA is not terribly happy because they don't think he's as conservative as they think the Pope should be.
I don't understand why they're upset to discover that the Pope is Catholic.
Hey, the Pope.
That's a pretty accurate description,
The
actually.
Pope Catholic. What a Pope from Chicago means for the world of Catholicism by Stephen P. Millies. Stephen P. Millies is a professor of public theology at Catholic Theological Union in Chicago, Pope Leo's alma mater. He says a few things are plainly obvious from the selection of this Pope. First, this brisk conclave. After lunch, I like to have a brisk conclave. Signals how strong the desire among the cardinal electors was to maintain continuity with the Francis papacy. I did it. I did it right,
Very good,
everybody.
Phil.
Good job.
I did it right. See, we discussed last week what's going to happen. Is it going to be like Francis backlash and go the other way? Or is it going to be Francis, we want to keep going in that way? And he says it was very clear that the cardinal electors wanted to maintain continuity with the Francis papacy. The cardinals have sent a strong signal that they mean to cement Francis's legacy. That was number one. Okay, it's been determined. We're not going backwards. We're going on with Pope Francis, but named Pope Leo. Then there's the name. The name last belonged to Leo XIII, who long preceded the fights over Vatican II and the culture war divisions that have plagued the Catholic Church since. But Leo XIII was also the first modern pope. He wrote about the problems of people living in the industrial age and defended the rights of workers against the greed of owners. Leo XIII gave us the first glimpses of how the Catholic Church faces the modern world. Interesting.
This is Kaitlyn's thing.
Kaitlyn, would you like to tell us why this is your thing?
It's her thing.
This is why this is your
What's-
thing?
Because Pope.
The Pope facing the
no,
modern
because
world?
Pope Leo XIII was like the source of a lot of Catholic social teaching.
Yeah.
Which is we did a whole
This
the whole
is-
getting school.
Yes, which
Ah.
I've already seen a few conservative commentators point out the significance of him choosing Leo as his name and saying, oh, it's proof that he's Marxist because Pope Leo XIII wrote this really important, wrote many things, but among them was a really important encyclical, Rerum Novarum. Skye and I did a whole Getting Schooled about Catholic social teaching. We talked a bunch about a lot of these themes
I should
in
listen
Catholic
to
social
these
teaching.
getting schooled with.
Yeah.
Exclusively for HOLYPOST Plus subscribers.
Oh, I
You
don't
should
think
get
I
on.
can
You
get
should
'em.
subscribe to HOLYPOST
Can I
Plus.
get an
Phil.
account?
Yeah.
Can you get me on the list?
Mhm.
That would be great.
But here's what's so frustrating about being like, oh, this is proof he's Marxist, is he's in line with Pope Francis and he's in line with Pope Leo XIII. Rerum Novarum is this really beautiful encyclical that manages to do what I wish more Christian theology did, which is to say, let's look at the underlying motivations for some of the fights that were happening at the time. Communism, socialism, capitalism, like all those conversations about economic and political systems are happening. And what he spends a lot of the encyclical doing is saying the underlying concerns people have about not only kind of ownership or their ability to participate fully in the market or any of those things, but also deeply their concerns for a certain kind of full human life, what it means to live well in community, what it means to actually be connected to the products you create with your hands. Like, he's addressing that deep human need and saying socialism, not the answer to that. Capitalism, not great either, but like we're kind of trying to figure out how to respond to these needs in a faithful Christian way. And the fact that people are looking back and being like, him choosing this name means he's a Marxist.
So,
if you actually go and read Rerum Novarum, is an insane thing to say. To me, what it means is he is going to be a pope along the lines of Francis, but maybe in some slightly different ways, I think, but a pope who wants to deeply engage social and political questions. And if it's in line with Pope Leo XIII, that's not by taking a partisan stand on anything. It's by interrogating the underlying questions of the human condition that Christian theology has a lot to say to. And that's a beautiful way for both a church leader and a theologian to engage.
So are you saying that Pope Leo XIII was not a Marxist?
Not a Marxist. In fact, if you go read Rerum Novarum, he has got some harsh words to say for Marxist ways of thinking.
I don't want to read it. I just want to say Rerum Novarum.
I don't think that's what it is.
Over and over. Rerum Novarum.
Kaitlyn, and the correct pronunciation is?
Rerum Novarum.
Oh, you got it. You got it right.
Yeah, Rerum Novarum.
Okay.
And then I wave my wand and you grow hair or something happens.
But okay, I have not read Rerum Novarum, but I did
Yeah.
read Pope John Paul II, and he was writing during the Cold War.
Which one? What was the name of his
I don't know.
papal
He wrote
bull?
some books. I don't think they were
encyclical.
I don't think it was an encyclical. I don't remember.
Encyclical.
What was interesting
Yes.
about that era during the Cold War is he was from Poland, which was obviously under Soviet control.
Yeah.
He had a lot of criticisms of communism, and I expected that. Most people expected that. But I was surprised to see him then turn his attention to the dehumanizing effects of capitalism. Like, he again recognized the problem with both of these systems while being staunchly anti-communist. So it sounds like Leo XIII, and maybe we can expect this from Leo XIV, is to not throw his lot in with any particular economic or political philosophy, but to say, here's what my faith in Christ and my commitment to the teachings of the church caused me to believe about the positive and negatives of any of these systems.
But you can't start with the teachings of Christ and then look at the world. You have to start with which economic system is the one you're supposed to like, and then you look at the teachings of Christ.
Right.
Isn't that
Right.
He's already come out and said that he has concerns about the current era and the dehumanizing effects of things like artificial intelligence. So
Pope Leo XIV?
Yeah.
Is that who you're referring to?
Yes.
You said he.
Yeah.
he-
I wasn't
well,
sure
there's
who the he was.
those she
Later
popes
today-
are so common.
Later today, I'm going to yell Rerum Novarum while I'm writing on my encyclical. Stephen P. Millies also said, and this is interesting, tell me if you agree with this or disagree, by electing Leo, the College of Cardinals was taking a side in global politics, including U.S. politics. Reminded of when Pope John Paul II was elected from behind the Iron Curtain in 1978, a move that signaled the church was choosing to challenge the Soviet bloc. Millies says, we are watching authoritarianism swell in all parts of the globe, but it is fueled most visibly by the Trump administration in Washington, D.C. Massimo Fagioli, a professor at Villanova University, where Leo also attended as an undergraduate, agrees with Vanillies, says Trump's re-election made a U.S.-born pope possible as it offered cardinals a potential pathway to counter the rightward political shift Trump helped set in motion. The Vatican, Fagioli, the Vatican, she has made her move, he said, noting Leo's elevation, doubles as an implicit rebuke of right-wing Catholicism in the U.S. Okay, are they reading too much into this?
I think maybe. I'm no...
You were there at the conclave.
Oh, of course.
What
No,
were they?
But I did hear an interview with Cardinal Dolan from New York, who I actually had met before because he and I spoke at a thing in D.C. together years ago.
Well, I'm sitting
we're
20 feet from where the Pope had
I
lunch.
know. Cardinal Dolan said that before the conclave started, the American cardinals all got together for a photo, for a picture.
Yeah.
And he said, Cardinal Provost, is that
Prevost.
Prevost. Cardinal
It's
Prevost.
before the Vost.
Right. He wasn't even part of the picture because he said none of us considered him an American cardinal
Oh.
because he was so identified
Right.
with
Yeah.
South America and
Been in
Peru.
Peru forever.
So he just said that's not his reputation within the community of cardinals. He's not known as an American cardinal. He's known but he is. I mean, he's got dual citizenship.
Well, and that actually could be kind of part of the appeal too. And again, sometimes we're talking about this. I've seen some articles that just sort of say like the Vatican did this. I was like, remember, there's a ton of people
Right.
vote, like all sorts of motivations and all. But there may have been an appeal to an American pope who can claim that as like that's where he is from, that's where he has been shaped. But also can speak a little bit as an outsider towards America. Not just, I think a lot of people have talked about, he's an American pope that can be critical of America, right? He posted an article, directly criticizing J.D. Vance's interpretation of the Ordo Amoris, but also not just because he's critical, but because he's coming from another perspective, has been shaped by people outside of America, has not been pastoring Americans primarily. There's a nice benefit to being like, I can claim this, and also I can speak as an outsider or speak from a different perspective at least. And that could be of benefit too.
Okay, Michael Signorilli, I don't know who that is, but he wrote an article about it, and he said he has a theory. Michael has a theory. Says Francis, because he kind of is putting more of this as this is what Francis wanted. And he kind of engineered this. Like he wanted, because he called Prevost to the Vatican 2 years ago to work closely with him for the last 2 years. He put him in the role of choosing bishops to put into office over the entire world. So he got familiar with many, many, many bishops, and many, many bishops got familiar with him. He was used to discipline the American bishops that got out of line, the guy in Texas that they ended up having to pull out of his church. So Michael's theory is Francis understood the need for a pope who is from this culture, America, who speaks English fluently, who spars in his own voice on social media, and who could sit down with American television interviewers and lay out the case against harsh policies and attacks on the marginalized. While the church is growing much more in Asia and Africa, Francis had to see that right now Trump is an existential threat to everything in the world that is held sacred. Everything, every last thing.
Oh.
That may be a little too far, including the Catholic Church itself. So there's now a voice in the Vatican who is both a citizen of Peru and the U.S., someone whose maternal grandparents were Creole, people of color from Louisiana, and someone with an enormous platform who looks like he will be an outspoken, homegrown counterpoint for all Americans and the world to the brutality of the Trump era. Oh, and that's when the angels began to sing. Oh.
I mean, so his argument is basically Pope Francis knew...
He engineered all this.
He knew he wasn't going to be around that much longer. He knew the cardinals ultimately pick the next pope, but he kind of said, wink, wink, this is my guy. If you support me, support him, and gave him the...
Yeah, and that's what the movie Conclave is about. It's about Pope Francis pulling strings behind it. It's exactly how it happened. Mm-hmm. It may not be how it happened, but the theory that this is the direction Francis wanted, and because no one thought there would be an American pope. Mm-hmm. Like there was almost a rule that you don't have a pope from a major empire,
right?
A colonial power, a major empire. And so that's partly why people were so surprised. But this theory that because of this political moment and right-wing Catholicism in the U.S. in particular, and how influential some of those voices are, like, for example, our Vice President, J.D. Vance, who is reinterpreting Ordo Amoris for using right-wing Protestant Christian Calvinist thinkers to help him tell you why you need to care more about your own ethnicity than other ethnicities. That was such a threat to the role of the church in the Western world, at least in the whole world, that it was time for an American to stand up. Interesting.
I think we could speculate forever, and the world will.
Well, let's do it.
As to why he was chosen. But
let's speculate.
I'll tell you what was weird to me, my entire life, I mean, Pope John Paul II was the longest serving pope in history. In my entire childhood, up to my adulthood, he was the Pope. And then you had Benedict XVI from Germany. Pope John Paul was Polish. And then you had Francis from Argentina.
Yeah, and he was the first Southern Hemisphere.
Right. But all of those popes throughout my life have spoken English, but done so with a thick accent.
Yeah.
And so to hear Leo speak perfect South Side Chicago English
Yeah.
was just weird.
Yeah,
I always think of the Pope as a foreigner.
He was the Pope for like a minute, and Portillo's named a sandwich after him.
I saw that.
It's our favorite restaurant in
Oh.
Chicago.
Yeah.
So, boy, things are in motion, and Trump has to be saying, "Wait, I need all the attention."
I'm sure he'll find a way to get it back.
Yeah, he probably will. Oh, that's pretty cool. I'm kind of encouraged. Kaitlyn, because
I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Finally.
yeah, it's kind of like we have help. We have the Quakers on the move, all 7 of them that are left, and we have a Pope that from Chicago, who was 20 feet from us having lunch and didn't even invite us over. So I'm a little hurt about that because we were right here. But that's okay because he wasn't Pope yet. So
we didn't
know.
have our signage up yet.
We didn't have our sign
They
up. Now we have our
didn't know.
sign up.
He would have been looking for
Yeah.
it.
He totally
if
would
it
have
had been up.
I bet he listens to the podcast. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I think Pope
Right.
Leo listens to the HOLYPOST. Let's do an event. Next event is at the Vatican. Let's see if he shows
I'll
up.
be in Rome.
I'll go.
I'm actually scheduled to be in Rome in 2026.
Oh,
Me too. Now.
really?
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like
Let's
a
do
for
it.
speaking thing?
No, we have a vacation.
family
planned.
vacation.
Yeah, thing.
Well, while
He has an audience with the Pope.
I was his first
You
phone
got to
call.
schedule him out. Yeah.
you're speaking at First Baptist of
He was
Rome.
sitting there in the Sistine Chapel and he got the vote and
Yeah.
they came around and they asked him if he accepts and he said, hold on, I'm on a call
gotta-
with Skye.
yeah.
He's
Giuliani."
like,
I
I
gotta-
get one phone
yeah,
call.
Skye's telling me what name I should pick.
before they give me the fancy red shoes and take my iPhone away.
My mom's dog is named Leo.
Really?
That must be why.
Oh my goodness. It's all just coming together. He ate right there.
Wow.
Your mom named the dog. How old is the dog?
1.5.
Oh, that's roughly when he was called and made a cardinal and called to the Vatican.
And they start thinking about their papal name once they become
Oh,
cardinals.
yeah. As soon as you're a
Even
cardinal.
before that.
Conclave taught me that.
We should play the game. What would your papal name be?
Yeah.
What would it be? Kaitlyn.
Oh, we're playing it right now?
Yeah, what would
Yeah, well, that's impossible. So
No.
Go
It's
for,
the 21st century. You can be whatever gender, religion, or pope you
No.
want.
Go for Peter.
No,
Go for
or
Peter.
Pope you want. Yeah, that's hard. You guys have so many names you could choose from to be the 10th or the 7th or the whatever. There's no women popes. So what would the first woman pope's name be? She would probably choose
Monica.
Mary.
Monica.
Monica. Ooh.
That's a good one.
Francine.
Junia.
Junior.
Junia. That would be controversial.
That would be good.
Because American
How about
conservative.
Phoebe.
Phoebe. I was just going to say Phoebe. Could you
Phoebe.
imagine Pope Phoebe? Everyone's just going to be thinking
Pope
about Friends.
Phoebe. Okay, there's like a baby boom of Phoebe names right now because all of the girls are realizing that, Phoebe was cool in the Bible and naming their kids Phoebe.
I think
It's not 'cause of
I
Friends.
think you hang out at the
Weird places.
at Duke Divinity School
Mhm.
and have decided that that's representative of the world.
You're not meeting baby Phoebes all the time? Baby Junias? I know so many baby
Do you
Junias. I
seriously?
know so many baby Phoebes. Yeah.
There's baby Junias.
Baby Junior.
Oh, yeah. I know at least 3.
Man, but their
You're
conservative
Nope.
friends are going to be renaming them Junio all the time.
No.
That's
no.
Junias.
Oh, Junias.
Junias,
Is that what it is?
Yeah. Like
Okay.
Julius.
Yeah.
Yes.
That wasn't a name back
But
then,
wait,
Junio.
I know. So wait a minute.
Junior?
Wait a minute. We got to go back to this. So in the community you are a part of in Durham,
Yeah.
in the Christian bubble, you have little Christian bubble.
It's not just in Durham. I've met a few baby Junias outside of Durham.
and you attribute
Okay,
this
Raleigh.
to scholarship that's highlighting these women who are named in the New Testament with some authority.
Yeah.
So Phoebe
Yeah.
and Junia are on the rise.
Big names.
Huh.
Mary, I don't know that there's a difference. That's always been sort of popular.
I love the name Mary. I think it's very.
Mary's a good
Well,
name.
if I had
but
a boy
Junia,
right
Phoebe,
now, in honor of women coming into their place in the church, I would name my son Phoebo or Junio. I like
Okay.
Phoebo in particular.
Ananias.
Ananias. What about what are their names? The
Yes.
couple. What's the couple? The
Aquila.
Aquila. That's
Aquila and Priscilla.
Priscilla.
Yes.
I have met some baby Priscillas.
Aquila and
Okay.
Priscilla.
Yeah, that's the couple I was thinking of. There.
And one of those is a masculine. Aquila is,
Aquila.
Aquila.
but shouldn't it be Aquilius or
I don't
Aquilo?
know what to tell you.
I really wish I had a rap
That-
sign right about now.
Mike is done. Mike done. Mike says, hey, everybody, knock it off. Hey, everybody, thanks so much. We're encouraged. First of all, because there's a little caterpillar that covers himself in insect bones and then just crawls around. And spiders say, I'm not eating that. That's gross. That's gross. Secondly, because we have a new pope who's, I was going to say he's doing amazing things, but he hasn't done really much of anything yet, but he's about to. He's got a Portillo's sandwich. He's got some great memes. He's got a nice smile, kind of Mona Lisa-like, you know. It's not like a big flashy grin. It's just a subtle little smile. It's nice. It's reserved. I like it. I'm with it. And the Quakers are on the move.
And
there's more.
There's a rise in really fun biblical baby girl names.
Yeah. And
take heart.
And soon to be their little brothers, Phoebo and Junio. And we got a great guest. Do you know who it is?
I don't.
Oh, it's great, though.
I think Kaitlyn did this one.
I think it's another Kaitlyn.
Oh, boy. Hang out and you'll find out
on Kaitlyn's.
who it is. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
The Holy Post is sponsored by BetterHelp. We are living in crazy times, and that can be hard on your mental health. Plus, relationship stress, parenting, marriage, and work stress, it all adds up. Well, don't try to handle all this on your own. You can get help from trained professionals. But the economy and tariffs and the price of eggs, adding therapy onto all that feels like a huge investment, and the cost of traditional in-person therapy can be huge, costing anywhere from $100 to $250 per session. Online therapy with BetterHelp can save you, on average, up to 50% for each session. BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served more than 5 million people around the world. It's easy, too. You can join a session with the click of a button to help fit therapy into your busy life. And you can switch therapists at any time. You can do better than just survive these crazy times. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/HolyPost today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/HolyPost. The Holy Post is sponsored by Brooklyn Bedding. You need a bed. Everyone needs a bed. It took a while for me to learn how much of a difference a good mattress makes, and now that our kids are grown up, they're figuring it out too. And that's why we got our daughter a new queen-size mattress from Brooklyn Bedding. She loves it, and you will too. Brooklyn Bedding, they've been around for 25 years, and they're known for high-end comfort and quality without the high-end price. Pick your firmness, your height, your dimensions, and get free shipping from their factory in Arizona. Upgrade to Cloud Pillow Top. It's like a pillow that's a cloud on top. Try your new Brooklyn Bedding mattress for up to 120 nights. If you don't love it as much as we do, they'll help you return it or pick out a different one. You've got nothing to lose except a bad night's sleep. Go to brooklynbedding.com and use our promo code HOLYPOST at checkout to get 30% off site-wide. This offer's not available anywhere else. You have to use our promo code on the very last page at checkout to get this discount. That's brooklynbedding.com and use our promo code HOLYPOST for 30% off site-wide. brooklynbedding.com, promo code HOLYPOST.
When I was an editor for Christianity Today, I attended a lot of Christian conferences. Most of them were for pastors and church leaders, and honestly, after a while, they all began to feel the same. Amazing music, huge video screens and lights, the keynote speakers were all megachurch Christian celebrities or secular CEOs, and the messages were all about leadership and church growth, and occasionally maybe personal holiness, but it was all very cookie cutter and incredibly predictable. And then came the Q Conference, started by Gabe and Rebekah Lyons in 2007. It was modeled after the TED conferences, which were super popular at the time. There were no flashy worship bands, no smoke machines and lasers. The talks were mostly short, and the stage was not dominated by celebrities or megachurch pastors. Instead, the stage was filled with artists and scientists and entrepreneurs and journalists, all doing their work for the common good and deeply rooted in their Christian faith. I remember meeting a pastor at a Q conference who told me that he was done going to other Christian conferences. He told me that every time he left one of those other conferences, he felt worse about himself as a pastor because his ministry would never be as big or as successful as the guys on the stage. But he said that after he left a Q conference, he always felt more informed about what God was really doing in the world and more inspired by the kinds of people God was working through. And that's exactly how I felt too. The Q Conference was just a breath of fresh air in a world of Christian conferences that felt stale and overproduced and super hyped. I had the opportunity to speak at a number of Q conferences. The first time was in Portland in 2011. And I also spoke at the Q Conference in Chicago and Washington, D.C., in Denver, and in Nashville. I loved these conferences and have incredibly fond memories of those events. But in recent years, many of us have noticed a significant shift. Q rebranded to become Think, spelled THINQ. That bonkers conspiracy theory that leveraged a lot of Christian language in the late teens and early 2020s. But the change to Q was more than just branding. The conference, its topics, its speakers, became a lot less about the common good and a lot more about the culture wars. Katelyn Beaty was my colleague at CT, and we attended a number of Q conferences together. She recently wrote an article unpacking the changes that she is seeing in Q. Like me, Katelyn Beaty moved on from CT years ago, but she still works as a journalist and editor and a keen observer of cultural and religious trends. She's written for the New York Times, the New Yorker, the Washington Post, Religion News Service, Religion and Politics, and The Atlantic, and she's commented on faith and culture for CNN, ABC, NPR, the Associated Press, and the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. She's the co-host of the Saved by the City podcast as well. Her recent article about the Q Conference can be found on her Substack. Here is her conversation with our Kaitlyn about the changes to the Q Conference and how they are representative of broader changes to American evangelicalism overall.
Katelyn Beaty, welcome back once again to the Holy Post.
Thank you. It's always good to be back with the one of maybe two Kaitlyns I know.
Yeah.
Spelled
It's
differently,
funny.
of course.
Yes.
But
It's funny being like, I'm the new Kaitlyn. Like, you were on the Holy Post before I was on the Holy Post. And now, from one Kaitlyn to another, welcome back.
thank you. Yeah, I was in the Holy Post 1.0 days occasionally. It goes without saying that you have helped to take the Holy Post to greater and greater heights. So I think the new Kaitlyn is better.
Well, I'm really glad you were willing to talk with me today, because unlike a lot of the interviews we do that are about books, this is about an article that you wrote on your Substack about kind of starting with a conversation about the Q Conference and some of its evolution over the various years that it's existed, but also really about how that particular conference and its evolution exemplifies some of what's happened in evangelicalism over the last couple decades. So before we get into some of the questions I have, which is more about, what does this mean about evangelicalism? How do we think about how we might respond to that? For people who are like, I don't even understand the last few sentences you just said, can you give some background on like what prompted this piece? What is the Q Conference? And why did you want to write about it?
Yeah. Well, I say in the piece that the Q Conference has been part of my professional Christian life from the very beginning. It was founded in 2007 by Gabe and Rebekah Lyons, who are Liberty University graduates. For a long time, the conference was held in different cities across the country, but for the last several years has been held in Nashville. Definitely a kind of, I think what I hear a lot of people describe it as in a very short way is like TED Talks for Christians, TED Talks for especially kind of thoughtful evangelicals, a kind of Christian leader, whether you're a pastor, a nonprofit leader, like in some kind of creative class. Going to Q was a way of becoming sharper and brighter and more engaged about important trends happening in the church and the world. So there was from the beginning, Q has kind of had a kind of culturally engaged, leaned into culture posture. Like, we as Christians are not called to be separate. We are not called to be sequestered in our little Christian bubbles. We are called to be in the world, even if not of the world, to be in various sectors of society, really with a vision of transformation. Like, we are to show up as, good teachers and architects and restaurateurs. Like, in the past, Q has featured people who are, people of Christian faith who are also leaders in their industry, talking about what it means to do their jobs with excellence and care as Christians. And so I started attending as part of my job with Christianity Today. I was part of a documentary series that was about Christians pursuing the common good in 6 different cities. And so being at the Q conference was like, this is where we need to be. This aligns so well with what we're trying to do with this project. And I always just found it really inspiring. I think there was a sense that like, this is not culture war. This is not the religious right of the 80s and 90s. We're rejecting that. Like as a generation of millennial Christians, up and coming leaders, we're rejecting that model of Christian cultural engagement, where we're choosing something more positive, like less afraid, less combative. So I've been, probably a half dozen times. I say in the piece I've spoken at Q a couple times. And so this more recent piece on my Substack was has really been prompted by conversations I've had with friends and acquaintances over the last few years. I would say probably definitively, if I had to put a mark on it, since 2020, where the conversation starts, what is going on with the Q conference? Like, did you see the lineup for the Q conference? Like, what's going on there? So I wanted to give voice to what I and seemingly others are observing about the conference's trajectory.
Yeah. And I've never been to Q. I've been aware of it for a long time. But what you just described and what I read in the piece that resonated so much with me, that I think resonates with a lot of people in our audience, is not just this sense of like, wait, I thought like a certain community I was a part of was a certain way and then I discover it's not, but also just this sense of like, where do I fit in the shifting landscape of evangelicalism? And it used to be there was like a certain home for me and now I'm confused by it. Can you talk a little bit about how these shifts in the conference exemplify some larger shifts in evangelicalism and how we might think about what actually is happening? Because I've even wondered for myself, is it that there used to be these bigger tents? Like conferences like this one or others used to just include more people, and I was one of those people included? Or have they really shifted from a certain political spectrum to a different part of the political spectrum? Have they shifted in their tone or the kind of posture they're taking? Like, is it me that's changed? Is it them that's changed? And in what way have they changed?
I've asked that question about a lot of things over the last several years, and I think at the end of the day, it's probably both, right? It's probably we have diverged on some real way. Well, I want to talk a little bit about Q as an evangelical conference and the role that conferences and other kind of trans-denominational broad tent organizations and gatherings play, like uniquely, I think, for evangelicals, because the evangelical movement is so dispersed over different theological and denominational traditions. You have this arrival of kind of parachurch organizations, ministries after World War II that are saying, this is what it means to be an evangelical, theologically, confessionally, also culturally and politically. But I think Q has kind of fit into that ecosystem in the way that like a Christianity Today or even, dare I say, a HOLYPOST might. Like, we're not aligned with a specific church or even a specific leader. I think, to its credit, Q, it's very obviously expressing the priorities and vision of Gabe and Rebekah Lyons, but it's not like the Gabe show,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about a conference like the Catalyst or the Orange Conference. Like, I think these places, your attendance at those conferences, and especially if you're a speaker at those conferences, they kind of mark you as part of this broader evangelical movement. I would say to this day, I write a lot in the piece about a handful of the speakers that have been invited to participate this fall that raise my eyebrows. I think, I say in the piece that I think inviting these specific people to speak on these specific topics and not in a panel format or without a kind of countervailing presence is showing a lack of discernment and gives the conference a kind of partisan tinge. It's too easy to say Q has gone MAGA. Like, it's not so much that there's overt conservative political agendas, or that the Lyonses are saying, like, we align ourselves with this political leader or party over the other. But I think the difference is that these specific speakers have aligned themselves with a very more combative, aggressive culture war tone that, you know, to have a way of like sucking up all the air in the room, you know, and I think have a way of signaling to evangelicals who are more centrist or even left of center, like, this probably isn't for you. I will also say the number of talks over the last several years about sexuality and gender, like, putting aside the content of the specific talks, there's just so much about sexuality and gender that one could walk away with this impression that, like, this is the defining issue for evangelicals. We can debate whether that is true or not, but I think from my perspective, it has outweighed other important considerations for evangelical thought leaders. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, I so appreciate the setup there, because I do think it's so important to say part of why we're even talking about this, because this could be the most like inside baseball conversation ever of just like people who are very online, who think about Christian conferences, but there's two important things going on here. One is, this is kind of how tones and kind of teams get set within evangelicalism, because to your point, without the strength, like the institutional strength of particular denominations or schools being like the grounding place, it tends to be this conference brings together people of like-minded thought on a variety of things. Like you know, with Q, it's more this approach to culture. With another conference, it might be here's this like theological segment, or that, you know, but those conferences help kind of ground people in identities when a lot of people within evangelicalism are not grounding their identity in a denomination or a particular institution. The conferences kind of do that. And then secondly, this sense of not just kind of what's the tent size, does this include a lot of people with different perspectives or not, but something you were just getting at there that I'd love to hear more about is the kind of, not just, because what you're not saying in the piece is, oh, they've invited some bad people, I don't like those bad people, they shouldn't do that. What you're saying is like, it seems to be weighted in a certain direction. There's one perspective that's given airtime and not another. But one point you make in the piece that I thought was really important was the kind of posture and tone of some of the people invited. Not just that they take a particular perspective and the counter perspective isn't presented at the conference, but that those people tend to have a pretty combative tone online and tend to think that the opposite perspective, well, of course it wouldn't be included on a panel, because I tend to say the opposite perspective is just wrong. I mean, is not worthy of real respect. That seems like a big shift, not just with this conference, but with how a lot of conversations in evangelicalism have increasingly come to be. How would you describe that kind of shift?
Yeah. This is going to sound so elitist, and we can talk about the elite versus populist divide and how that also affects evangelical gathering spaces and institutions. I would say, yes, you know, the speakers that I raised issues about, we disagree on a lot of things, but I think you're right, Kaitlyn, to note that really it is more about tone and posture than about the content of their argument. And that the tone and posture is more, I'm right, you're wrong. You're not just wrong, but like you're evil. You're an evil person. And I'm making the very clear argument that I think this is antithetical to how Christians should show up in the world, whether online or in conversation or on a conference stage. This does not exemplify the best of what I think Q could be. But there's also this sense that what it means to be an authority or a leader or an expert on a particular topic is judged or gauged more by your ability to amass a particular following online and kind of like from the ground up. I would say, I mean, this is simplifying in some way, but I thought, like, this is just one clear example. Someone like Francis Collins, you know, former head of the National Institutes of Health, evangelical Christian, has, I trust, received the education and credentialing among his peers in the scientific field to research and teach what he does for the benefit of public health conversations. I hope that doesn't get me canceled saying that. Because I'm like, I thought we all agreed on this, but I guess not, you know? So we can talk about maybe, have you shifted? Have I shifted? This year, and for the last several years, so Francis Collins has spoken at Q in the past. I kind of think of him as like exemplifying a kind of Christian leader, like the best and the brightest of a particular field, who are also like committed to Jesus and are faithful to scripture and part of a local church. And this is what it can look like to be a Christian pursuing the common good in the world. For the last several years, Q has invited a chiropractor and business leader named Dr. Josh Axe. I don't know if that's his real name. It sounds too much like Dr. Oz for me for it to like are these your real are these your given last names? He is a business leader who the business is called Axe Wellness, dispenses tips related to like healthy eating and exercise and kind of like holistic health. Since 2020 has been critical of the COVID vaccine, has taught that like the power of positive thinking can help address a lot of our current medical. So he's like, you know, in some ways like very anti-medical establishment. And he's a guy who like has his business and he has a very popular online following. It's almost like we've gone from, these are just two different models of what it means to be a leader and where your credentialing comes from. Yeah. And maybe in a very simplified way, it's like we've gone from a very elite, like evangelicals wanting to be among the elite and wanting to highlight Christians who have kind of made it there, to a more populist, like whatever is amassing a large following that's what matters. That is how we gauge someone's leadership or opportunity to speak from a stage at this national gathering.
Yeah. And it seems like those are really deeply connected, both the sense that we credentialize people by their, especially online, but in general, kind of popularity versus traditional means of credentializing them through degrees and certifications and institutions. But with that comes then the kind of combative posture. I mean, not necessarily, but it seems like the way you build popularity online, it's a lot easier if you're combative and you tell people the other side is not just wrong, they're evil. And that relates to something else you talk about in the piece, which is some of the shift that you discern in the Q conference that, again, I would say is exemplifies a larger shift within evangelicalism, is this shift to a negative world view of our culture. Like, I have to say my enemies or the people who disagree with me are enemies if it's a negative world. If it's like, no, actually the world outside of the church is combative towards us. I have to take a more combative posture when it comes to cultural issues. When it used to be really friendly towards Christians, but now the world is really negative towards Christians. For people who aren't familiar with this like negative world idea, can you talk a little bit about where that comes from and how that affects this kind of shift?
Yeah. So the phrase negative world, meaning Christians now live in a world where being a Christian is a negative, like a net negative against them, comes from a writer and consultant named Aaron Renn, who lives in Carmel, Indiana, writes a lot about like urban public policy, masculinity, but he has created this term. He, like, in his schema, you know, like in mid 20th century America, Christians were in a positive world because it was a culturally, it was a net gain for one to identify publicly as a Christian. And then like sometime in like the 80s or 90s, up until 2014, he really marks it 2014. We were in a neutral world where maybe it was a little bit more nuanced or based in situation. Like our neighbors weren't necessarily for us or against us. They just kind of like shrugged at Christians doing their thing. And then from 2014 onward, he says that we have been in this negative world where it is anathema to identify as a Christian publicly, especially if you hold to more traditional claims around gender, sexuality, or are just more kind of conservative theologically and politically. So in the piece, I kind of tease out whether let's accept that this is like the new reality and Aaron Renn is getting it right. I tease out whether we can actually speak meaningfully about like Christians contributing to the common good or pursuing the good of their neighbors or like working alongside people across many different religious traditions or no traditions, but they're all like, they're doing their work with excellence. If we're in such a negative world, like why or how could Christians like redeem or restore segments of culture? Maybe things are just so bad that we have to drop that model or that vision of cultural engagement and really either retreat, which is, Rod Dreher, and the vision of the Benedict option is, and there are other iterations of that, but more kind of pull out, like separate, form our like smaller Christian communities that can really resist the cultural tides and the forces that are against us. Or, another model would be like, no, we pick up our arms and we fight. Like we fight back. We align ourselves with political leaders and administrations that are promising to do that on our behalf. So I'm just wondering, I think it's safe to say that at the end of the day, the Lionses are culturally conservative Christians, have spoken about pressures that they have felt around holding a traditional view of gender and sexuality. I'm just wondering if there's a sense that like the vision that Tim Keller gave us, the late pastor gave us, that was so infused within the Q ethos for so many years is just, it's naive, and certainly I thought perhaps distastefully, but shortly before Tim Keller's death a couple years ago of cancer, there were people, conservative Christian intellectuals who were openly debating whether Tim Keller like basically got it wrong on this front, that he had too rosy of a view of secular culture, that he gave us this vision of cultural engagement that was like weak or woke,
Yeah.
That's where I feel like you've changed.
Yeah. Well, it was the whole kind of winsome debate. Like, was the winsome approach really weak, or did it really assume? And there were more charitable versions, I think, of this that said, we appreciate what Tim Keller was trying to do, but he was just wrong about the world we live in. And then there were some pretty, as you said, like quite distasteful criticisms of him that were just like, he was weak or wrong or grievously wrong or
right. They went after him more kind of personally, like he like fundamentally as a leader, as a person, like misled us, and he has to be corrected.
Yes. And sometimes for nefarious intentions that could, the person assumed of him. I want to talk a little bit about that relationship, this like negative world thing and the kind of Tim Keller. And it's not just him. There's a lot of folks in the era he was writing in and continue today that have a more positive, constructive approach to Christian cultural creativity or engagement or encounter. Talk a little bit about like part of that criticism of Keller assumes, or some of the criticisms at least assume, that this was a kind of pragmatic thing. Like, given the situation we're in, we can do this, as opposed to a more universal theological approach that just sort of would say, like, under any conditions, this is how Christians should respond to these things. Can you talk a little bit about which of those you think it is?
Well, not knowing Tim Keller's motives or heart, but knowing how much work he did to root his vision of Christian cultural engagement in the scriptural story, as well as in his own experience living alongside and working alongside and ministering to people in these big urban contexts that many of us find intimidating or kind of, traditionally seen as like the hotbed of secular hostility or
scary, like truly. People might,
anti-Christian culture or something.
Yeah.
And he was writing and sharing that vision out of decades of this kind of ministry experience, as well as his deep love for the church and for scripture. So given what I know about Tim Keller, just based on those facts alone, I want to believe this is a vision that he's offering not as a pragmatic, this can help us win culture for Christ, but this is how we are called to live regardless of the outcome. Because we are people who are called to be salt and light wherever the Lord has placed us. And we're called to love our neighbors. I mean, fundamentally, we are called to love our neighbors as ourselves, even if our neighbors are against us, even if our neighbors patently disagree with us, even if our neighbors want nothing to do with us or the church or Jesus. Like, I know that can sound so naive or like Sunday school, but what if it is actually one of the most profound, radical things that we are called to do and be? And how sad it is that I feel like I have to say, like, I know that sounds a little naive, right? So I don't think at the end of the day that Keller was primarily being pragmatic. I do think, and I can't speak to whether this is true of like the Q conference organizers or other organizations or leaders in the past who have talked a lot about the common good. I do think there was a way of thinking about the Keller approach that had cultural dominion in mind rather than a specific spiritual or ethical call for how Christians are to live in their daily lives. I think there was perhaps a sense that, like, if we get enough Christians in these sectors of society where there's a lot of power and wealth and prestige, then we can see this kind of top-down influence, and like our people will have the power, and then things will be put to right. You know, things will be the way that God intended it with a culture or a nation. I didn't even touch on this in the piece, but the seven mountains dominion. What is that? What is it called? Seven mountains. I have to look it up.
I think it's
the seven mountains of influence.
Yes. Yeah.
Or the seven mountains mandate. Anyway, where the goal is not like a specific spiritual or ethical vision for the people of God and how they are to be and live in the world, but rather like, if we act and behave like this, then we will get the power. And I kind of want to say, I don't think that's a pragmatic approach. And I wonder if some Christians feel like, well, that didn't work. That model didn't work because same-sex marriage became the law of the land in 2014.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, name all sorts of other hot-button cultural issues. But like Aaron Wrenn, when he talks about 2014, that is in fact what he has in mind, is the Obergefell Supreme Court decision on legalizing same-sex marriage. So I wonder if there's a kind of, well, we got to switch tactics. We have to, and I would say some of the speakers at this year's Q conference are more in the tactic is to fight, because our neighbors are our actual enemies. They are our flesh and blood enemies, even though Ephesians 6, right, says our enemies are not flesh and blood. I wanted to make sure I got the right chapter. I knew it was Ephesians 6.
That was it.
Well,
that was so great, because what the next thing I was going to ask you was, what do you think is appealing about these two visions? Because part of the dynamic when it comes to a Christian conference is like, what sells? Like, even the most well-intentioned people, you're putting something like this on. Well-intentioned people also make podcasts that have to pay attention to what people, like all of the things we are making, the books we are writing, everything like has to on some level pay attention to what we think people will want.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask, like, what do you like? Because so clearly something has shifted in what's compelling or captivating to people, that there's like a market for this kind of approach. But what you've just described is partially an answer to that, of like, was there an underlying, actually quite similar element that was compelling to both of these, both the end goal of kind of like some kind of transformation, which you could have a really positive view of, but also a sense of kind of like comfort and power in the context that you were in. Anything else you want to say about that? Like, what makes this compelling to people? Do you really think it's kind of the same? The same vision is compelling. It's just the strategy that gets you to that goal has had to change.
I mean, we all want power, right? And I'm not even saying that in like we're all secretly like Gollum. I mean, we all want to feel like the world around us is ordered in such a way that we have agency, that we have freedom, that we have robust community, that our neighbors are generally for us, that we are understood. Like, I think so much of this plays out probably at a local level, and could sometimes come down to like an interaction, with another parent at my kid's school or something, or like a heated debate in the fellowship hall after church. Like, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I don't fault anybody for wanting, I don't fault any Christian for wanting to feel, I don't fault any Christian for feeling that there is something profoundly broken in modern life, in modern society, that the winds of culture are against them, that there is real anxiety and fear that produces or can produce, and that there are only so many options on the table for how to move forward. And if what is being offered on the table, and what I'm also seeing kind of reiterated and rehashed, like in my social media feeds or in conversations with friends or like in my podcast or like YouTube media ecosystem, is this is a time when Christians need to fight and reclaim the cultural dominance that is owed to them as Westerners, and the like the true inheritors of Western civilization. It's like, well, maybe that is right. I think all of us are so much more influenced by the social and cultural context we find ourselves in, and the certain scripts that are given to us than we realize. Like, it's very rare for any of us to like come up with a brand new script. It's like, well, for a long time it was like, well, Tim Keller said it, and all these other Christian leaders seem to think he's right. So that's probably the right way of thinking about Christian cultural engagement. And now it's just not Tim Keller. It's like Allie Beth Stuckey.
Yeah.
Who is one of the, that wasn't random, who is one of the speakers at this year's Q conference, who I feel very comfortable saying does not exemplify the kind of Christian thought leadership that Q has traditionally been known for.
Yeah, in part because of what we said before, of kind of like combative approach and also demonizing of opponents and critics. And Kaitlyn, I said I was going to ask you this earlier, and you were kind of like, oh, I don't know if I have an answer, but I would love to know just like how we might respond constructively to this. Like, not just, I mean, I think most of us, vast majority of people listening, do not run a conference or a church or an institution, or like we're not the kind of people making decisions about like who's on the stage of these kinds of things. And it can feel very disempowering, to your point earlier, to just be like, okay, I think Kaitlyn's right that we are shaped by the forces around us, and the options that feel available to us are not just all available options. They're the ones that seem most plausible given the context that we're in and the culture we're in and the church we go to and the family we're in. All of that's true. How might we, given all of that, think more constructively about how to respond to a world that does feel, to many people, like the winds are against them, like there's great anxiety, there's great fear, but we don't have the power to kind of change the sources that are inputting all of that into us.
Yeah. Well, you should probably start a Substack and just like complain about stuff there. That's what I've done. No, I don't feel like I have a great answer for you that is not sort of basic, but I do wonder if the shifts that we're seeing, not just at Q, but in many evangelical organizations or gatherings where it once felt like, a lot of us felt like these are my people, and it no longer feels that way. I wonder if that is a reminder that these, parachurch organizations, these big tent conferences or organizations are under all sorts of pressures that we as outsiders don't know that much about. I mean, I didn't even talk about kind of the financial elements of all of this. And I don't want to reduce everything to this is just about money and retaining a base. But I think, any institutional leader knows that financial considerations are always at play. I just wonder if this is a time to invest more locally. Like the thing that gives me hope and solid footing in a time where I'm like, you're a Christian and you said that? I feel like I have that experience every day on the internet.
Yep.
Is the local church and like the people that I worship alongside and I'm in relationship with week in and week out. And maybe it's Sunday morning worship, but it's also like friends and people I'm in community with and connected to. I'm like, this is the embodied model that I have for what it means to be a Christian in the world. And that's all I have right now. You know, I think I feel, I don't feel as much hope around these kind of trans-denominational parachurch evangelical organizations. I think they have lost a lot of power, you know, over the last 20 years, as institutional trust is down, as they themselves are trying to navigate like massive levels of polarization and being pulled in all different directions and pressures from donors. Like, I just don't, I'm less likely than I ever was now to think of myself as like a Q Christian or a Christianity Today Christian or even like a HOLYPOST Christian.
Yeah.
Because they're not the most kind of real embodied model of Christian life in the world that I have. Those are the people that the people I have for that are the people I'm actually in relationship with in the local church and in friendship and relationship.
Yeah, no, I feel like a lot of these kinds of conferences that I've been to, either from the stage or in one-on-one conversations, people will talk about like, oh, every year when I come to this, I'm like, oh, these are my people. And there's something nice about like, if you're in the midst of church ministry and there's things that are really hard and you go to a conference with a lot of people on staff that like think similarly, there can be like a refuge to that. But I've always thought there's like a danger there in elevating the experience of just being with people who are so much like you and think like you and talk like you and read the same books that you read and listen to the same podcasts you listen to, and then going back to your local church and being like, oh, but it's not the same because like we don't read all the same books and we don't have all the same thoughts. And it's like, but that's not how the church should be. Like that's maybe how a conference should be occasionally, but sometimes those conferences end up elevating that kind of communal experience that is not, I think, what embodied church experience should be like.
Right.
Yeah,
and also
ahead,
conferences are like as much as Q represented to me in a previous time, it's a once a year conference, right? Like, and it's, you know, in the past, it's been in a different city every year. It's like, how much could that actually sustain you? Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kaitlyn, for talking about this article with me. I again, fun. Like, it sounds probably initially to some people like just like the most inside baseball thing to like evangelical culture and conferences, but I found it really encouraging though to hear you talk through like, these are shifts that impact people in churches and they impact the content that we are consuming and the kind of options that feel available to us, and thinking critically about them is really important. So thank you for writing the piece and for talking today. Yeah, it was fun. Thanks for having me.
The HOLYPOST podcast is a production of HOLYPOST Media, produced by Mike Stralo, editing by Seth Gorvet. Help us create more thoughtful Christian media by subscribing to HOLYPOST Plus at holypost.com/plus. Also, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts so more people can discover thoughtful Christian commentary, plus ukulele and occasional butt news. Visit holypost.com for show notes, news stories, HOLYPOST merchandise, and much, much more.